Hey, welcome back to another episode of Whiskey Row. So tonight we're going to be diving into two different Michter's products. We're going to be comparing the Michter's Single Barrel 10-Year Rye and the Michter's 10-Year Single Barrel Bourbon. Now, both of these bottles are pretty hard to come by. You really have to hunt for these. They're expensive on the secondary, and they're not easy to get. So if you ever have the chance to get one and you're going to spend the money on one, which one should you get? Well, tonight we're going to dive in and we're going to figure out which one I would recommend that you get if you ever have the chance to get one, or if you're going to drop the cash and actually pick one up on secondary. Now, I've already poured them in Glencairns, and they're labeled on the bottom. I don't know if we're going to use that or not, but they're labeled just in case, so at least I don't get them mixed up. So to dive into these a little bit, the Michter's 10-Year Bourbon, as many of you know, has been a longtime favorite of mine. I've tried several different pours from different bottles. This is the bottle I have, and it's been the best Michter's 10-Year Bourbon that I've ever picked up. Now, some of the samples I've had were decent. They were okay, but they weren't delicious. This one is delicious to me. And this one I actually picked up recently via trade, and I've been very impressed with this. And I'm excited to compare this to some other ones. I've had some side-by-sides with this and some others. Some other really high-end ryes like the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Proof. Just tasting them, just kind of fun thing off camera. And it really compares well. So let's go ahead and start. Let's start with the bourbon because that's the one that I've got the most familiarity with. So this bottle has been open for quite a while, and on the nose, it has a kind of very faint, fresh banana with cream, maybe a little bit of kind of a pepper herbalness, very faint, a little bit of proof, and a little bit of caramel. This Michter's 10 bourbon, it has this really good caramel sweetness. There's a good bit of oakiness to it as well with the 10-year barrel age. It's not really off-putting oakiness at all. It's just kind of a nice mellow oak. Then the caramel comes in. There's a hint of herbalness. It's got a really long finish. It's giving me a really nice hug. It has a really good mouth feel, good mouth experience. And overall, it is still one of my favorite bourbons. It's not my favorite bourbon. We've gone through my favorite bourbons, and it's not number one anymore, but it's still in the top. If I could, get another bottle, I would get one in a heartbeat, and hope to someday. But this is a quality bourbon to me. All right, now let's dive into the Michter's 10-Year Single Barrel Rye, and this one again I got via trade from Craig. Thank you, Craig. And I have enjoyed it so far. I haven't gotten too deep into it. But on the nose, this has kind of almost like a green banana, like a really young banana that's not fully ripe. Good bit of caramel, a hint of an herbalness, just a very kind of mild herbalness. That's about it. It smells really nice on the nose. Now on the palate, it hits you with a good little bit of rye spice up front. But there's this gushing, almost brown sugar and caramel sweetness that almost turns to like a candy bar sweetness. It's very rich and sweet. It has a nice mouthfeel. There's no spiky flavors. It's just very well balanced, very sweet. It's very good. So with my unhealthy love of Michter's products and my unhealthy love of Michter's 10 in particular, to now be able to compare the bourbon and the rye is kind of my dream, right? So having put these side by side, when we're talking about secondary prices on these, we're looking anywhere from $250 to $350 depending on store. Retail on them alone is I think 160s now. They're not cheap by any means. They're definitely expensive bottles. So where should your dollars go? Which would I say stands out more? These are single barrel products. So every barrel is going to be slightly different, but between the barrel that this came from into this bottle and the barrel that this came from into this bottle, I really feel like the better experience across the board right now as the bottles stand is with the rye. This rye really kind of is a standout rye. It has such a good sweetness on it for a rye. The rye flavors are very muted. The sweet spot for a rye is really struck with this one, and I couldn't really, this may stand up very favorably to some of the other really nice ryes that I've got. It's just so rich and creamy and sweet. With the bourbon, I really feel like the flavor knobs are just the tiniest little bit out of sync. To me, the oaky notes you get on the palate are just a little harsher. There's a hint of a peanut, which it's not off-putting, but it's there. but you get this, this oakiness and a little bit of peanut, and obviously it's got tons and tons of sweetness and caramels, brown sugars. It's really, really good. But the knobs are almost like they're not quite in sync as much as you get with the rye. To me, the rye really stands out as the better bottle. And I would probably say that if I were going to drop the money for $160, $70 at retail, or if I wanted to chase something up into the secondary at some price, and I had to choose only one, I would go with the rye. It, to me, stands out as a better example of a very well balanced, very expensive, very mature rye than the Michter's 10 Bourbon stands out as a very expensive, very well balanced, well done bourbon. So for that, I would say that the value proposition of where to put your money falls into the rye category. You're going to get more for your money by buying this Michter's 10 Rye than you are by buying the Michter's 10 Bourbon. If you have the chance to buy both of them, I would highly recommend that because they're both really, really good bottles. Now, the question comes down to at $170. In the very best case, you're going to buy these at retail and you find them somewhere and you can get them for retail at $160, $170. Is that too much for what you're getting? And I think there's a lot of people's opinions about how much to spend on a bourbon and what's too much. And, some people say, oh, I'll never spend more than $100 on a bottle of bourbon because there's so many good bourbons under $100. And I totally understand that because with the bourbon we can get right now on the shelf, readily available for under $100, under $70 in many cases, I could go through a giant long list of bourbons under $70 that are fantastic bourbons. And we could do an hour-long video about that. But is it worth going up to $170 for these bottles? Well, obviously you have to be willing to pay that you have to have the budget, right? You have to be able to afford a $170 bottle of whiskey. If you do have $170 for whiskey, and what would your best option be? Would it be to spend $170 on this rye, or would it be to buy a $100 bottle of rye and then maybe a second bottle for $70? Maybe that would be a better use of your money, and that would be hard to argue against, frankly. I mean, it's twice the amount of alcohol. You're still getting two fantastic bottles, right around $80 to $100. So why not go that route? Well, part of the fun of what we do in huntings and hauls and all this stuff is tasting special things. There are a lot of products out there that are overpriced for what you get, but that doesn't mean that they're not good bottles or good experiences, right? So the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Proof Rye was $70, and it was, as of right now, still the absolute best rye whiskey that I've ever had in my life. I've had Kentucky Owls for $200. I've had this bottle that was $170. I got it via trade, but the bottle I traded it for was almost $170 too. So it is what it is. I've had really, High West Midwinter Nights Dram that I paid almost $200 for on secondary. And those are all really, really good bottles, but they provide different experiences. And if you're willing to spend the money on more expensive things, I can't think of many other bottles that are in the 170 range that I would recommend more highly than this bottle of rye. Now, on the bourbon side, are there other bottles of bourbon that are more than $170 that are better than this bottle of Michter's 10? When you start to talk about that price range, this is a really good bottle of bourbon. A bunch of other things out there that are more expensive than this, and the secondary is much higher than this. But if you can get this one at $170, is it worth it? Yeah, it is. If you have the budget for it, it's definitely worth trying to chase one down and pick one up because it's a special bottle as well. So, but if you had to choose between the two, I at this point, I'm still confident. Hold on, let me make sure I'm still confident. Nope, neither sip. Oh, maybe my mind's changed. Ooh, man, those are so good. My mind's still the same. I just need an excuse to drink more. Thank you so much for watching the video today. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much to the Patreons who continue to support the channel. If you're interested in supporting us on Patreon, please check us out at patreon.com/whiskeyrow. And until next time, find a bottle you love.